The story of a renovation at the White House and the planned creation of a big ballroom is the perfect example of how media failures have left people in the dark. There are two polar opposite takes on what's been happening. Depending on someone's media bubble, they're either hearing that Trump has launched a destructive, crazy expensive vanity project that might even be illegal, or that it's just a long-awaited change and that the left is freaking out about nothing. Listeners sent me stories about this from both of these angles, and as I pieced through them, I had trouble at first figuring out what's real. So imagine what it's like for the average news consumer. This is such a powerful sign of how people have learned to distrust mainstream media, so they turn to other media where they also don't get a full, accurate picture. If big legacy media in this country was doing its job, then people would have a place to turn to for the facts, clarity, truth every day instead of spin. But hey, at least you get that once a week here. Today, what's true and false about the demolition and plans for a giant new space. Plus, early voting has begun in the mayoral race in New York City. News organizations generally dig up and play up a candidate's past offensive remarks, but not when it comes to antisemitism on the left. Then the media just isn't interested. And if it becomes a story at all, then the story has to frame the candidate as a victim. Today, I'll take you through proof, current examples that show this insane double standard in action as the media rolls out a red carpet for Zohran Mamdani. I'll explain why a piece of his so-called rap music is relevant. Also today, an update on another story. This one involves the elected president of a group at Oxford, the student union, site of the world's most widely respected and recognized debates. I did a debate there. The student leader who celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination might face an actual consequence, despite the media's effort to run cover for him. The media is the problem. Truth is the solution. That's why this show exists. We're showing the media that they stand corrected. Hello and welcome. So good to have you here. My name is Josh Lebs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. Along with this show comes a newsletter. I encourage you to get it. It's free, filled with lots of links and stuff. I don't expect you to take my word for anything. I have additional content, annotated transcripts, social media content, and more for people who take the extra step and support the show by becoming paid subscribers. When people do that, they have the option of including a note. Let's see. Lisa Schaller-Goldberg became a paid subscriber. Thank you so much, Lisa. And she wrote, "Hi, Josh. I would love to send you a men's shalom sweater." Great. I don't know what that means, but I'll get in touch and get you an address where you can send things. Is that like a Christmas sweater except for Hanukkah? I almost never wear sleeves, but I will for you. And hey, it does get cold sometimes where I live in Atlanta. So thank you so much. I appreciate all the support in all the different ways. A lot to jump into today. Let's do this. Starting with the White House. Let's listen to this clip from MSNBC.
The destruction of the East Wing of the White House to make space for Donald Trump's 90,000 square foot ballroom. That number doesn't even make sense if you're a human living on Earth 1, but it is bigger than everything that is on the complex now. Almost twice as big. It is a reversal even from what Donald Trump had promised to do.
It won't interfere with the current building. It'll be near it, but not touching it, and pays total respect to the existing building, which I'm the biggest fan of it.
That's Nicole Wallace. She then brought in Jen Psaki, another MSNBC host.
Seeing these photos is honestly a tremendous gut punch. It makes me so sad for the people who won't be able to see it, who haven't seen it. And to me, it's kind of one of the most physically destructive things that Trump has done, obviously.
And they had on Cornell Belcher, a political analyst, talking about the price tag. As I record this, it looks like the estimated total is $300 million, not funded by taxpayers.
You can't escape the symbolism of This not being about the people and the people's house, right? It is corporations, big, large, powerful corporations piling in and for vanity projects for one man.
But then there's this from the National Review, a conservative site, but one that has criticized Trump. It's not a devotedly Trumpist site.
Of all the reasons to criticize President Trump, this must count as the silliest. Often, Trump deserves the opprobrium that is cast his way. Here, he most decidedly does not. This, to put it plainly, is a non-story, a freak-out, a fiction spun from whole cloth. There is not a grain of truth here, but a vacuum. Trump is replacing a handful of office buildings with a ballroom. That's it.
So, which is it? These are exact opposite takes. What we need is for mainstream news outlets to come along and make this stuff clear with no political bent. Is this a big deal? What are the rules, and were they followed? What exactly did the Trump administration do and not do? How is something like this supposed to be handled? I went looking, and there wasn't anything helpful. There were some non-political conversations about this. Here was a clip from CBS's website. They spoke with Jennifer Pickens, a woman who traces the history of the White House. She did not seem to have any kind of political bent.
I wasn't that surprised. I felt like, okay, it's finally happening. I know for sure that the Clinton administration had really recommended to the Bush administration that they consider putting some sort of permanent pavilion up because they really learned to have the numbers of people that they wanted to entertain. They were constantly having to do tents on the lawn.
So that was a calm conversation without politics, but it did not suss out what the rules are surrounding all this. Okay, here's why I wanted to toss these clips at you at the top. This right here says so much about what's happening in the media. How should news media work? Mainstream media. It should get you truths that matter. Truth requires two things. Say it with me if you've heard the show. Facts plus context. These agencies should be answering all the obvious questions about what's going on. And they should do that in their coverage of the news all the time in order to win you over as an audience. But they don't. CBS is one of many examples. As I've reported here on the show, CBS lets Trump administration people get on the air and lie all the time. And CBS lets people lie on the left all the time. I know that now some people are hopeful for a change at CBS with new ownership and the appointment of Barry Weiss, the founder of the Free Press, to a high-ranking position there. More on that in a future episode, but people have turned away from mainstream news because of its failures. If a news agency did its job regularly, then you would know where to go for information, but you don't have that. So, more and more people have been turning to left-wing and right-wing media. For example, I have talked about how Sky News Australia, which is part of Rupert Murdoch's empire, they might do the best job of any news outlet in the world when it comes to calling out craziness on the far left and showing moral clarity against Islamist terrorism. All that. They're great on that. So people might turn to them. Then, while they're there at Sky News Australia, they might hear this, a conversation about the demolition with former Fox News host Megyn Kelly.
So, President Trump wants to improve the White House. So, what's he done? A flagpole in the front yard, a flagpole in the backyard. He's turned the rose garden. He's put down a patio so he can have some outdoor barbecues. And now he wants to build a ballroom. He's paying for all this, by the way, but the left's brains pop, pop, pop.
I think it's awesome. I feel like, why didn't we have a ballroom before? I actually didn't really know that.
She said people complaining about this have Trump derangement syndrome.
They didn't complain when Obama did not only his basketball court that he added, but he did some 4-year reno to the White House that cost something like $380 million during his first term.
No, he didn't. But you wouldn't know that. This is what happens when mainstream news agencies fail to do their job. You get a place that avoids one political bias, but also tosses things at you that aren't true. I took some time here and went through what I can find about the demolition. Here is some clarity. Hey, Don, my engineer, what's a good sound effect for clarity? Yeah, I like that. That's good. What do you think of that, folks? Let me know. Okay, so Trump did indeed promise that he would not mess with existing structures at the White House, and he has broken that promise. There also are legal requirements. There's this thing called the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They put out a statement urging the administration and the National Park Service to pause the demolition, they say, until plans for the proposed ballroom go through the legally required public review processes. And that includes these two different groups that have authority to review new construction. I can tell you the names, but it's just going to be like a word salad of titles. They're called the National Capital Planning Commission and the Commission of Fine Arts. Anyway, don't worry about it. I'll put the statement in the newsletter if you want to see it. The point is, two groups that do have authority to take a look at this. And the statement says that they also invite comments from the American people. So they say this work is not supposed to be done until it goes through the approval process. The White House seems to be challenging that. They're arguing, well, we've only done the demolition part. We haven't actually built the next thing yet. And that's what requires approval. But this group, the Trust, is saying, no, the demolition is obviously part of making big changes that need to be approved. Now, this is a good place for me to tell you that, in general, this administration has a bad track record of interpreting laws and respecting laws, and that gets proven in the courts. So the administration keeps facing court battles and loses a lot of them. So there's no reason to believe that the White House is in the right legally on this technical front, but that could potentially get fought in the courts. Meanwhile, there is something else going on that is relevant here. All right, so we're going to pull out of just this demolition thing for a second. At the same time as all this, Trump is trying to get a massive personal payout to himself from the Department of Justice for alleged rights violations in the Russia investigation during his first term. Current reports indicate that he is seeking $230 million from the DOJ, which is from taxpayers. Now, that's so obviously corrupt. It seems like this crazy opportunity for grift. We don't know what will happen with that, but here's why it's relevant. He is saying this new construction at the White House is not going to be paid by taxpayers. So don't worry, taxpayers are not on the hook for this. But it's not like he is protecting taxpayer money. Okay, at the same time, it does seem that the idea of creating a big ballroom does not automatically have to be controversial. And there is a good chance that if this ballroom is built, then whenever the next Democrat is elected president, the same people you just heard on MSNBC freaking out about this will probably attend an event at that new ballroom for the Democratic president and not hate the ballroom. All right, that is very likely. Now, there also is an element in all this that's subjective, and that's Trump's taste. I mean, he is gaudy. He is the man of the golden toilets and stuff. That's a matter of taste and opinion. So you might like his taste, not like his taste. That's not a matter of fact checking. One more point on this. There is a big overarching reality here. The shutdown. Federal workers have been going without pay. A bunch of them are lining up at soup kitchens. Some have to work without pay, about half of them. So around 700,000 federal workers are working without pay. And Trump chooses this time to start what he says will be a $300 million renovation project funded by himself and corporations and other rich people. I want to be clear, I'm not talking about optics, how this looks. I'm talking about decisions to choose to start this now and say, hey, don't worry because I have so much money and my corporate sycophants are so rich. They have all this money. They'll pay for it. No question here. If a Democrat was doing exactly that, right-wing media would be calling it out, of course. But the motto of today's media across the board is rules for thee, but not for me. Speaking of that, coming up, the mainstream media is giving New York City mayoral frontrunner Zohran Mamdani a kid gloves treatment. It's proof that a candidate can say how much he loves convicted backers of terrorism and still be adored by big media. Do you drink coffee? I don't. but I do drink energy drinks. I know they're probably not great for me, but I started after a doctor I used to work with. We were both on air at CNN. I used to see him guzzling them. So I was like, it can't be that bad. Anyway, here's why I bring this up. I have been looking for the easiest possible way for listeners of this show to help support it without having to sign up for anything. So there is now a button you can click in the show notes or the newsletter called Buy Me a Coffee, except I changed it to energy drink. You could toss in $1 or, for a nice significant figure, $1.80 or $18, whatever you wish. Here's what I can promise you. Knowing that you are helping fuel this effort for truth-telling will give you more energy than a fancy, overpriced double shot, whatever, from a coffee place. And supporting this show is way, way cheaper. You don't even have to give an email to support in this way. It's just a click. It's buymeacoffee.com/JoshLebs. Give yourself that percolating sense of joy and help me keep pouring you bottomless cups of truth. And while you're there, if you want to, you can toss in a request for this show as well. I'm here to serve. Is that enough coffee puns for this break? Coffee break! Let's see, Googling coffee puns. Oh, these are awful. I love you a latte. You mocha me crazy. Oh, I can't espresso how appreciative I am. Okay, that one's all right. Don't worry, be frappy? That doesn't even rhyme unless you pronounce it wrong. Buymeacoffee.com/JoshLebs. Thanks. When political candidates run for office, news agencies dig up controversial things they've said and posted. Actually, it's often opposing candidates who dig those things up and secretly point them out to reporters. Anyway, you end up with lots of reports like this.
We have known for months that Barnett is one of the most vociferous sharers of lies about the 2020 presidential election. And now CNN's K-File has uncovered a history of straight-up bigotry, anti-Muslim and anti-gay statements made by Barnett.
That's CNN in 2022 talking about Kathy Barnett, who was running in a Republican primary for a Senate seat.
And in a speech uploaded to YouTube in 2015, Barnett argued it was okay to discriminate against Muslims and compared rejecting Islam to rejecting Hitler's or Stalin's worldviews.
These kinds of reports pop up about political figures all the time, not just candidates. The other day, CNN had this.
Trump's controversial pick to lead the office of special counsel dropping out. Paul Ingrassia posting moments ago, quote, "I will be withdrawing myself because unfortunately I do not have enough Republican votes at this time." Well, the reason for that is reporting from K-File, who first reported here out front that Ingrassia had a long record of making extreme statements, including that straight white men are the most intelligent demographic group. He also shared a 9/11 conspiracy video, which claimed the United States government planned the attacks or let them happen.
And there's been a bunch of reporting lately about disgusting remarks in a private chat group of young Republicans. That's a title. Young Republicans is a political youth organization. Here's NBC.
New fallout tonight from a racist and violent group chat involving leaders of some young Republican groups, as reported by Politico. The outlet obtaining more than 7 months' worth of Telegram messages in which they say members muse about using gas chambers against political opponents. "I'm ready to watch people burn now," one person responds. Another describing rape as epic. The chat includes anti-Semitic comments and racial slurs against Black, Latino, Asian people, and other epithets.
Because supporting hate is a bad thing, right? Except when it comes from the left. There, you can support hatred and talk about your love for people convicted of financing Islamist terrorism and still be adored by big mainstream media. This is happening with candidate Zohran Mamdani, the man who is way out in front to become the next mayor of New York City. In a previous episode, I explained that he has vowed to take illegal, unconstitutional action and have the Prime Minister of Israel arrested if he ever comes to New York, even though the mayor of New York has no authority to do so. And voters on the left love it. I also wrote about this the other day in the newsletter and on social media. Every person who supports Mamdani loses the right to complain about extrajudicial arrests by Trump or anyone else. But let's focus on a candidate's history of offensive remarks and actions. You wouldn't know from the mainstream media, but Mamdani has his own very problematic history with anti-Semitism. The editorial board at the Wall Street Journal did a good job of calling this out. I've told you about them. The Journal has also been condemning Trump. They are not in the far right's corner either. In July, they had an op-ed about him. The Journal, like some other outlets, has an AI voice read a bunch of its pieces.
This has been the first time in Zohran Mamdani's adult life that he hasn't wanted to talk about Israel. To obsess over its sins, real and imagined, to destroy it, to expel it from the club of nations. Even the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust was for Mr. Mamdani an occasion for anti-Israel propaganda.
They pointed out that in his initial statement, he refused to specifically call out Hamas and terrorism, instead trying to group together Israel and, quote-unquote, Palestine. And they noted that he then went into libel, spewing lies about occupation and apartheid. I have disproven those in previous episodes. Actually, if you haven't heard it, I encourage you to go back and listen to episode 1 of this podcast. Anyway, less than a week after the October 7th massacres, Mamdani was already accusing Israel of being on the brink of genocide, which is insane. 2 years later now, there was no genocide by definition. Here is more of what the Journal's editorial board pointed out.
He was arrested while protesting against Israel, not Hamas. As an assemblyman, Mr. Mamdani made denouncing Israel his priority. He called a boycott the only solution and can be expected to advocate it as mayor. He proposed a 2023 bill cracking down on most Jewish institutions that donate to Israel. He conspicuously declined to co-sponsor Holocaust remembrance resolutions the past few years, and he defends the chant "Globalize the Intifada," despite its call for violence and intimidation in our streets.
In 2017, Mamdani released a rap song. I played you a little clip at the top of this episode. Here it is again. He said, "My love to the Holy Land 5, you better look them up." A group called the Canary Mission did that for you. Here's what they explain.
These 5 men were convicted of funneling over $12 million to Hamas, a U.S.-designated terrorist organization responsible for the murder, rape, and kidnapping of civilians, including Americans. Mamdani sent his love to convicted Hamas funders. Let that sink in.
It's true. And the media knows this because the media reported on it at the time. Here's an NPR report from 2008.
Jurors agreed with prosecutors who said the Holy Land Foundation helped fund Hamas, which the U.S. government labeled a terrorist organization in 1995. After the guilty verdicts, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Texas, Richard Roper, called it a great day in the United States.
We will not tolerate those who choose to finance terrorism. That's a clear message with the resounding verdict of guilty on all counts. Money is the lifeblood of terrorism, plain and simple.
Prosecutors say the Holy Land Foundation sent Hamas at least $12 million disguised as charity.
And in that trial, the prosecution presented evidence that the Holy Land Foundation folks were in touch directly with Hamas leaders, even though it was illegal. Mamdani rapped about his love for these folks. Where is the mainstream media on this? Think back to those other examples I just shared with you. There's been no similar coverage of Mamdani's history of supporting a vicious anti-Semitic hate movement designed to demonize the tiny Jewish state. No similar coverage of what he has said and done in the past. If you even try to find the New York Times, for example, mentioning his rap about love for the Holy Land 5, you can find mentions buried inside stories that are framed around Mamdani as a victim. Recently, they even ran a headline saying that he was experiencing Islamophobic attacks involving his refusal to show any moral clarity against Hamas and his adoration for Holy Land 5. The Times then changed its headline from Islamophobic attacks to vitriolic attacks. I saw someone online say that the original headline made it too obvious that the Times has been acting as his personal PR team. It's true. When other political figures are called out for their actions and remarks, they are not presented as victims. No one in the mainstream media has called Mamdani out on this and challenged him on his love for people convicted of illegally funneling millions of dollars to an Islamist terrorist group that kills Americans, along with others. And that's not all. The Free Press had a good piece showing that just the other day, Mamdani praised and showed adoration for an imam in New York with a long history of links to radical Islam. This imam was a character witness for a man convicted of plotting terrorist attacks against the United States. The imam said, "I respect him." But this is where we are now. This is how radicalized voters have become. The New York Times is helping make that happen. Two of its most prominent opinion writers from the left have been rushing to praise Mamdani all they can and citing their own Jewishness as relevant and misleading people, refusing to tell their audience about his illegal threat and his support for terror funders. At least now another Jewish opinion writer there, this one identifies as conservative, Brett Stevens. He published a piece. Here's a little clip from that.
One of the ways anti-Zionists tend to give themselves away as something darker is that the only human rights abuses they seem to notice are Israel's. The only state among dozens of religious states whose legitimacy they challenge is Israel. The only group whose suffering they are prepared to turn into their personal crusade is that of the Palestinians. Has Mamdani sponsored bills to oppose, say, the persecution of Uyghurs in China or Kurds in Turkey or gays in his native Uganda, where he was photographed in July with a notoriously homophobic official? Did he ever wrap his love for the people of Iran fighting their regime?
Of course not. The mainstream media refuses to accept reality. This is a perfect example of why people who want truth cannot count on these big news outlets. So they go elsewhere, where they get spin on everything else, like demolitions at the White House. This system is not working. I have contact information for you, whom to reach out to demand better on all this from big media. Coming up, plus an update on Oxford and where you can see the debate I did there. The Oxford Student Union is the site of the world's most respected debates. I did a debate there defending the brand of feminism. We won. You can see a video of that through the newsletter. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated, the president-elect of the student group there celebrated it with multiple posts. I discussed this in episode 74. The media tried to do the same thing for him that it did for Mamdani. It framed this student leader as a victim for having to face criticism over what he said. The BBC headline about this student leader, George Abaronye, was that he was being racially abused for his posts. See, just like with Mamdani, there surely have been some bigots weighing in as well. But that's always the case, including with the people I told you about earlier. When offensive things are done by people on the right, the media leads with how offensive that person's statements and actions were. When it's on the left, then the mainstream media leads with how awful it is that they're facing bigoted criticism. Totally separate standards and practices. This is not journalism. This is how propaganda works. Amazingly, this young man at Oxford has been voted out now in a no-confidence vote. But according to reports, he's claiming tampering with those votes. We'll see what actually happens here. It's nice to see a potential actual consequence, but there's also every reason to believe that this guy will become a media darling, with the BBC and others painting him as a victim. Right-wing media, of course, won't do that. They'll show moral clarity on that issue while also feeding you falsehoods from the right. Speaking of that, I mentioned earlier that Obama did not do a $380 million renovation of the White House. What happened there was that before he was president, so back in 2008 under George W. Bush, the federal government approved an infrastructure project to update the White House. The price tag of that was $376 million. So Obama was in the White House when it happened, but had nothing to do with it. If the media's lies bother you the way that they do me, let the leaders of these news organizations know. Send them an email and copy me in. I have a list of email addresses for you. It makes a big difference to copy me in for two big reasons. First, that signals to them that I might be showcasing their journalistic failures publicly. And over time, the more they see that people are listening to this show, the more likely they become to get concerned and take action. Also, I have other email addresses that I don't list publicly that I can forward your message to. I also have guidance for you on what to write in your email. Just check out the link in the show notes or the newsletter. What a week. Now I'll tell you, while putting this episode together for you, I had a pipe leak in my house. It's been a giant mess, but I refuse to miss a week for you. As always, let me know what you think through the newsletter or the form at my website. And thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.